this week on the Navigating Personal Growth podcast. For today's episode, we're completely going off script. We are abandoning our normal outline, and we are going to share with you the lessons I've learned in 100 episodes. So instead of telling you 100 lessons, I boiled it down to 10. So that way it can be something manageable. And this episode is great for anyone listening that wants to start something new in their life. Hey Navigators, my name is Brooke and I am your host here today on the Navigating Personal Growth podcast, and we are celebrating today. It is episode 100. I could not have imagined having 100 podcast episodes when I started in January of 2023. So that's been 24 months ago for me, if you're listening to this live. And in 2 years, we've produced 100 episodes. Is that not crazy? Like, it's just crazy to even think about, and so exciting. So today's episode, we're completely going off script. We are abandoning our normal outline, and we are going to share with you the lessons I've learned in 100 episodes. So instead of telling you 100 lessons, I boiled it down to 10. So that way it can be something manageable. And this episode is great for anyone listening that wants to start something new in their life, or someone that likes a peek behind the scenes. So if you don't subscribe or follow us, please do on your favorite platform, whether it's YouTube or Apple Podcasts or Google Play or Spotify. It helps us get our message out to other people, as well as dropping us a review about what you love about the podcast. So here we go. Lessons I've learned in 100 episodes of the podcast. Yay! Okay, number 1, you don't have to know everything to get started. So many times in life, we become so overwhelmed with all the tiny little details that if we would just get started, we'll figure all that out on the way. Like the episode descriptions I wrote in the beginning were terrible. So much so that a podcast agent at a podcast convention told me, like, you need to get better at those and writing your titles, or no one's ever going to find your podcast. And number 2, the name of your podcast sucks, the Navigating Personal Growth podcast used to be called The Grit Crusade. It sounded strong. I was excited about it, but no one was searching for Grit Crusade, right? Such a unique name, like catchy, but not effective. So we updated, rebranded, and became Navigating Personal Growth podcast. And so you don't actually have to know everything to get started, and don't let yourself get bogged down in the details. All right, number 2, once you start pushing a ball downhill, it will roll. Think about that. It's physics, right? Once you start pushing a ball downhill, it will roll. Once you start making a podcast and you say you're going to drop it every Thursday, you do. Once you start writing a blog, painting, drawing, any of those things, once you get started, you'll just keep doing it. And that's true in so many areas of our life. So we don't have to know everything to get started. And once you start pushing that ball downhill, it's going to roll. Number 3, probably the best part of the podcast right here, okay? Everyone has a story if you take time to listen. I am genuinely by nature an extremely inquisitive person. So if I meet someone at a dinner party, I'm like, what do you do? Where are you from? How'd you meet your spouse? Do you have any kids? What's your favorite thing to do in your hobbies? Like, I will talk to someone so long that when they leave, they don't know anything about me, and I know everything about them, because I genuinely love learning other people's stories, because I think it's an amazing way to see the world through the eyes of other people and how they ingest information and how they digest what's going on in life. And so if we will slow down and take the time to listen, everyone has a story. And I feel like some of the best episodes we've had in the 100 have been from like our incredible guests. I mean, Zach Cox came on and unveiled his half a decade long struggle with sobriety that he had never shared before. That was huge. Stephanie Vaughn came on and told us about her experience being in prison, not once, but multiple times. Taylor and Abigail Otwell have both been on here as a married couple who shared totally different versions of their lives, of how they met and grew their company Laricon, which is now, they've sold most of their shares off, or some of their shares off, and it's become this huge global brand. And they're just 2 regular people that are from Arkansas. And so many people have amazing stories, but we got to take the time to listen and genuinely be curious. All right, number 4, it takes a team. Say it again for the people in the back, right? No matter what you want to do in life, the people you surround yourself matters. And I have that horrible voice of my dad growing up saying, if they jump off a bridge, are you going to jump off a bridge? I'm not so-and-so's dad. Who you're around is who you're like. And I hated all that. But guess what? He was right. So Dad, if you're listening, you were right. And this podcast is no different. There is no way I could pull off what we do without my amazing executive assistant, Rebecca Wallace. She's been critical in the last year to all the episodes, from creating album art to holding me accountable to making sure I've got all my things ready, my ducks in a row, and my episode descriptions and titles done. And our wonderful production team at Clinton Creative. Get yourself a production team if you're going to have a podcast. That is the biggest thing for success. So unless you're somebody who loves the editing part and the production part, for me, I'm the content girl. So it takes a team. Acknowledge that team, love them, and be grateful for them. Number 5, don't be afraid to admit what you don't know. I knew nothing about production, nothing about podcasting coming in this. I'm not even a big podcast listener when I started the podcast. I just knew that I wanted a platform to be able to share my truth, share my stories, and share the stories of others in hopes that we could help each other along in this journey called life. And it's okay for us to not know everything. It's okay that I had no idea how to write podcast descriptions. It's okay that I didn't have any idea how to position the podcast to actually get to the listeners that needed to hear it. That's okay, because those are things I can ask for help. I can get trainings on. I can look to other people who have gone before me, but it's okay to admit what you don't know and that you don't know everything. All right, number 6, always look for ways to improve your craft. So speaking and talking is something that comes natural to me. Okay. The number one fear of people, Google it, is public speaking. Okay. That's not something that's a fear of mine, but you know what is a fear of mine? Failure. I want to do a really good job at everything that I do. So I'm always looking for ways to get better, not just at podcasting, but in other areas of my life. But I think if you are looking to start anything, start where you are and grow from there. We can always look for ways to get better. All right. So that's 6. Number 7. I already believed this one, so it's not actually a lesson I learned. But it is a lesson in the podcast, is to share your truth. Share your truth. Be transparent. Be open. Be honest. You have no idea the lives you're going to change. I'm going to tell you a quick story on this one. So many of you on the podcast have commented, wrote in, listened to the episode about surviving suicide. Okay. If you haven't, we'll link it in the show notes for you as well. Obviously, with the title, trigger warning there, right? So my mom committed suicide in 2013. Okay. Through that, I have been able to walk the journey with other people who've experienced people lost through suicide or just general experiences through suicide. This morning, I wake up to a text, 5 a.m., fellow business owner here in town messages me and says, hey, had 2 guys on a job site last night and someone committed suicide at that job site. What do I do to support them? Do I ask them anything? Do I check on them? Do I leave them alone? Because no one knows, right? But if I had never shared my truth and shared my journey, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to be able to speak to her and speak into that moment and offer to go meet with those young men, to be able to say, hey, are you okay? Do you need anything? You know what? This is hard and this sucks, and it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to struggle through this, and it's okay to have questions, and know that 100% there's nothing you could have done to stop it, because that's what you feel so many times in a situation like that, is that there's that guilt. But you've got to share your truth. Doesn't matter how you have to do it. You don't have to have a podcast. It can be at coffee. It could be at church, sharing your testimony. It could be through writing a blog. It could be on your Facebook post. It could be direct messaging someone. It could be sending a letter in the mail, anonymously even, just to let somebody know that they're not alone, because that is the worst feeling in the world, is to feel alone. All right. So that was number 7. Number 8, do it even if no one is watching, because someone is. When I started the podcast, my goal was never to be the biggest podcast around, but I told myself, because you always have those like little seeds of doubt that creep in, right? Of like, what if no one listens? What if you're not any good? What if people make fun of you? But I knew in my gut, somebody's going to listen. Even if it's just one person, somebody's going to listen. And guess what? They did. And so I'm going to share a few stats with you. We started the podcast 2 years ago. This is episode 100. As of the time of recording, we have 10,000 downloads on the podcast. Whoop, whoop. That's such an exciting number. I remember when we had 1,000 episode downloads. So all the episodes together, we've got a 10,000 downloads. We have 8,500 views, 8,510 views on YouTube, and 256,000 impressions on YouTube. What? 256,000 people have seen our videos come through their feed. So that means it's gaining traction, which is our goal here. We want to spread the word about navigating personal growth to as many people as possible because we want people to hear our truth, other people's truths, and so they know that they're never alone. And there is a path through life where you can find joy. So do it even if no one's watching, because someone is. And if they're not today, they will be in the future. So keep going. Don't give up. All right, number 9, what gets scheduled gets done. So whatever it is that is important to you in life, if it's going fishing every week, working in your garden, if you don't make it a priority, it won't get done. If you don't take control of your schedule, someone else will. So I'll give you an example of how we do on the podcast. The podcast gets recorded every Friday. Every Friday. If I'm traveling, then we skip those days. And so usually I record 2 at a time. On Fridays, me and my executive assistant get together. Then she takes the drive with all of the content on it over to our production team who does their magic. And then it gets onto the website. Okay. If we didn't have that scheduled and we were just trying to figure out whenever to get the podcast recording done, it probably would slip between the cracks of running these other companies, being a mom, doing all the things that I do at home with my family and my husband. So what gets scheduled gets done. So for me, I need to take that on advice in writing my book because I've started writing my book. I've got the outline of my book done, but am I scheduling time to work on my book? Wah, wah, right? So what gets scheduled gets done. All right, number 10. Here's the last one. We're fast and furious today. And this one's to my bones. This is to my bones. Okay. Do it with passion or don't do it at all. And that is true in everything in life. I constantly ask myself about the podcast, about other businesses that I have. Is this bringing me joy? Is this furthering my goals? Is this something I still want to do? If the answer is ever no, you have the pen. You get to change it. You get to simply pick something else. So do it with passion or don't do it at all. All right. And here are 2 closing quotes I have for us today as we wrap up episode 100. Whoop, whoop. Can you tell I'm excited about this? I feel like I've done like 4 whoop whoops on this one. Do I need another sound like woohoo? I don't know. Whoop whoop just feels like from the 90s. That's got to be a 90s kid, right? All right. Here's 2 closing quotes to close out our episode 100, where we shared 10 thoughts, or 10 things I've learned, lessons I've learned over 100 episodes. The first one is from Maya Angelou. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. Isn't that the truth? If you've got something to say, put it out there in the world. You never know who needs to hear it. And lastly, from the late, great Mother Teresa, honesty and transparency make you vulnerable. Be honest and transparent anyway. Until next time. Thanks for listening to the Navigating Personal Growth podcast. I'm Brooke Plack. Join me again next week on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. This podcast is produced by ClantonCreative.com.